place inside of the mind, There's your place inside of yourself. Look then, just take the pleasure to blazing inside of you. And my eldest sister to begin. Thank you very much. So, yourself.
Which had electricity and air-conditioned fairy lights. This was only had moonlight, and we had to carry a generator and hold the light over for the camera. And I mean, perhaps two important concepts that I didn't bring into it is that how it's how this whole ritual performance is very much related to folk arts and to the play, the idea of the play, the lila, the Hindu lila. So it's actually a folk play, although this is done in a kind of, this is a divine play, in the fact that they are playing with deities. And in the Creole translation of lila, they do use the word play. So this person who goes into trance is a player. He's said to play. You know, so you play this deity, you play that deity. And so lila is a key concept, and the other, in this play, there's also the idea of Maya, which is the illusion of the phenomenal world. So in effect, in the play, you're supposed to help you as a way of seeing, to receive darshan, and to go beyond the world as we see it. So it's also playing with your ways of seeing, the way playing with alternative ways of seeing. And this is constantly negotiated. I mean, in terms of my field work, this is an idea of how this is done. It's not a scripture, it's not a written text. It's constantly negotiated and translated, and the ritual is constantly being transformed throughout its different diasporic dimensions, from where I went to India, to the Caribbean, to different islands, to North America, and so forth. But because time is, let's leave it there, and I'll be happy to open it up to dialogue.
Thank you very much indeed, and that was an absolutely fascinating contribution, I think, to the whole notion of the cosmopolitan, which is just that word that we trip off our tongues. And I particularly liked your call for the reappropriation of transculturation. I think that is tremendous, because I mean, what we've been concerned about all weekend is the way in which global markets and transnational government organisations can direct us on ways we don't want to go. And I really think that call for reappropriation is a real call, and then that superb example of really working from what we think of as the margins. So it was really valuable, and I'm sure we've got a lot of questions. We have only got to 1 o'clock because of our afternoon programme, but can I invite a question? Okay, back.
Yes, thank you for your thought-provoking speech. Actually, I've been asking myself of this critical cosmopolitanism in a grassroots level, as you have proposed in your speech, because the more we seek this, the more we question the construction of a collective identity, the more we are into this trouble of questioning ourselves. Is there really a need of construction of this so-called collective identity? Be it the reason, be it political, cultural, or for other reasons. And in what ways should this construction of collective identity be practiced in the grassroots level cosmopolitanism that you propose in your speech? And another question is about the translation and transculturation, because I suppose that I actually admire the way you give us the video clips about Kali in different contexts. But the problem is that with globalization, we are facing more difficult, different and overlapping contexts, be them small or in a regional scale or in a national scale. So in this large variety of contexts, how should one group, for example, the Indian diaspora or the Chinese diaspora, keep their identity by using the rituals or worship or religions in these contexts? And that brings about another thing about after the Babel Tower. I think that's the meaning, that's the metaphorical meaning of the title After the Babel Tower, because if we can, we are trying to construct a Babel Tower in this globalized world. But what if this Babel Tower could ever be constructed? What then? What after?
What if it could be constructed, did you say?
Sorry?
Did you say what if it could be constructed?
Could it?
Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it's a question.
Yeah, no, I think, thanks. I mean, that's really interesting and thought-provoking questions. And, I mean, coming back to, why should we construct identities, which in a sense, it's because I'm arguing in a kind of ambivalent way, because on one level, we're talking about a kind of flow of identity and releasing identity and not fixing it. And the other is rooting it. And how do we root it without going back into the orthodoxies? And I think this is, obviously this is, I think this is a crucial issue. And I think this is, it's in between that we're constantly negotiating. Because I think on the one level, it's very hard to just think of this divine flow, which is Dante's take on Ulysses and his hubris, although I don't see it as a sin, but it's a kind of hubris, because this absolute divine flow and total rootlessness and being attached to no place. It's something that really probably goes beyond the human. Even if we are dispersed and multiple, we're probably rooted in a multiplicity of places. So, I think it's another way of looking at rootedness. And rather than just saying, looking at rootedness as going back to origins. So this is why I also wanted to emphasize that although one narrative may see this as a kind of continuity of an Indian rootedness, but there's another narrative that is a kind of transformation negotiation. It doesn't mean they've totally dropped this rootedness, nor do we know where this transformation is going to. And some of the things that I see, I didn't have time to go into the critique, are perhaps not so positive. There's a kind of critical dialogue going on that is not, that I think needs, the critical dialogue has to be invested with critical dialogue, and I think the critique has to be there, even on this level. And when I was in Brooklyn, one of the things I didn't like was the different colors of the gods that I saw on the plantation were suddenly all kind of blended in nicely. Like the very black gods had become less black. And I said to Pujari, what are you doing? I said I couldn't even recognize these gods. And they said, well, many people here are frightened of black people, so you thought you'd make them a bit whiter. So I'm not simply, I agree. I think the question of critique is really, it's really an issue. And in a sense, I see myself now as well, personally, in my own autobiography, as I describe it, as a kind of rooted cosmopolitan, because I've repatriated after 2 attempts to use the official term. But what does this repatriation, does it mean I'm rooted back to my origin, or why have I repatriated? I haven't quite answered that, because I certainly don't see myself as being identifying with the Hellenic or the nation state or